I'm gonna say something, and you ain't gonna like it, okay? But I need you to hear me out, and then I got solutions, okay? You ready? The babies can't read. The babies can't read and they don't have no reading comprehension skills, and it's your fault. You did it. You wanna know why? Cause y'all be trying to bully them into liking reading, and that's not how that goes. Them babies don't want to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, okay? They want to read something that's fun. It's your fault. Also, they don't see you reading. You don't take them babies to the bookstore. You don't read with them. You don't do any of that. You just be trying to leave it to the teachers, and the teachers got enough. They with them all day. They can't do everything. The babies can't read, and it's your fault, and I'm here to fix that. Okay? All right, get your notebook, sit down, and come in here. I said you weren't gonna like it. You ain't believe me. I said that, but anyway. Hi. I'm Shelby Monet, and welcome back to Shelby in the Book Club. In today's video, we're going to talk about books that you should be reading with your teenagers. You should be reading with your children. You should be reading with your children. You should be reading with your children. They may garner the love for literature on their own, but if you're just going to bully them and leave that just to the teacher, it's not going to go the way that you want it to go. It's not going to go how you want it to go, friend. So you have to read with them. Okay. So I have I don't even know how many books I wrote down on this list, but I have a bunch. We're going to get into that. Before we get started, make sure you like, you comment, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what books were you reading as a teenager, and would you let your teenager read those books today? I don't have a teenager, but the answer for me is no. And without further ado, let's get into it for real this time. One of the main things that people ask me is how did your mother get you into reading? And I need y'all to understand that I come from readers. There were books in my home. My dad would take me to the bookstore. My mom would let me just pick books off of her bookshelf. There were books in my home. I saw my mom reading. I went to book events with her. I remember going to book signings with my mom. At school, we went to the library, right? I checked books out of the library all the time from as far as I could remember. My mom read a lot of things with me. I still have some books from when I was little, where my mom would write notes in them. I still have them, right? The collection of books that I have now is large and vast, but I had all of the Goosebump books, right? My older cousin Callie, he gifted them to me. He let me have his collection. I still have my Shel Silverstein books in my closet. They being my family set the blueprint for me, right? Reading was normal. It wasn't this taboo thing that I only did at school, and it wasn't this structured, you have to sit down and you have to read this amount of time during the day. It was something that they modeled for me. And as I got older, I just did it on my own, right? I've always been in love with words. I originally think my love for words comes from music. So I say all of that to say is you have to lay the blueprint for them. And if you go about it with the thought process of trying to make them read because you think it's going to make them smarter, that's where you're going to fail, right? They're not going to be susceptible to that. They're not going to want to hear that. That is a fly. You got to get the hell on. Sorry about that. I'm leaving that in the video too, because y'all family, that's what I get for having the window open. Anyway, I got my mini girl here. If you see me looking down, it is because I'm looking at this. The books are all linked down below if you would like to purchase them. The pictures of the covers will be on the screen. They're in no particular order before anybody asks. And let's get into them. All of these I have read except for a few, and the ones that I have not read, I will let you know. Let's start off with Blood at the Root. Y'all have heard me talk about this throughout this year. multiple times. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Ladarian Williams did an amazing job with this story. And I love that he is on the New York Times bestseller list. This tells the story of Malik, who is a young boy who loses his mom at a young age, ends up in foster care, but he also has powers, right? And we follow him through the tragedy in his life. Like, we get glimpses of that. We get the conversation about foster homes and bad foster parents, so on and so forth. But then we get to college with him, and his college is a magical HBCU, which I thoroughly love. Go into this understanding that although it is a fun read, right? It was very nostalgic for me. It has the representation that I wanted reading similar books as a kid. Know that I think this will be a good conversation starter for you and your kid, because you'll be able to have certain conversations, right? You'll get to see their thought process on certain things, like how Malik decides to handle dating and how he decides to handle his magic and all of this other stuff that I think is really cool. I thought it was a great book. The audiobook is really good if you want to read with your kid, but maybe you don't necessarily have the time to physically read. You can listen to the audiobook. The narrator for the audiobook was phenomenal. That young man did an amazing job. Next, where do we go from here? Let's talk about Grown. Grown is by Tiffany D. Jackson. Tiffany D. Jackson is a phenomenal author. Her YA is great. She is one of the first YA authors that I read as an adult. One thing I want to say about YA books and reading them as an adult, for me, I had to remember that I'm not the target audience, right? The babies are the target audience. So I think that's something that you may need to remember too when you're reading these books with your kid, that there may be lapses in, I don't want to necessarily say in the writing style, because the writing style is not bad. It just may not be what you're accustomed to, and you have to remember that you're not the target audience. You're not the target audience. And that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. It's just you're not the target audience. So remember that. Grown tells the story of a young woman named Enchanted. She auditions for to become a singer for a very popular artist. In the book, his name is Corey Fields, and it turns very bad. I read this book in one sitting. I didn't listen to the audiobook. I read the physical copy. It was amazing. Again, another conversation starter, right? Like, I think this one we could talk about, or y'all could talk about, the connection that parents have with their kids, right? Like, when your parents make certain decisions for you, why they're making that decision for you, right? And just leaving lines of communication open. I also think, because we are in a day and age where a lot of teens are making a lot of money on social media, it's just a conversation of like, what crowds should you be around? What is age appropriate, right? What's not age appropriate? How we should be going around these things, and how you could have better communication as a parent with your kid without making them feel left out, right? Because safety is important. And I think if we talk to kids on a better level of just making them understand that, like, your safety is important. I'm not trying to make it so that you're not having fun, but like, your safety is important. I think it'll bring up a good conversation. But I read that book in one sitting, like, a couple hours start to finish. It was good. And that's one of those stories you can connect back to real life, and it could lead to a lot of conversation. Let's talk about some historical fiction. So The Conductors by Nicole Glover. The Conductors is a part of the Magic or the Murder and Magic series. So it's The Conductors and The Undertakers. I read both of them. I thought they were great. So Hetty Rhodes and her husband Benji were conductors on the Underground Railroad. ferrying dozens of slaves to freedom with daring, cunning, magic, and magic that draws its powers from the constellations. With the war over, those skills find new purpose as they solve mysteries and murders that white authorities would otherwise ignore. I love historical fiction. I think sometimes the only opportunity that kids get to read historical fiction is in school, and it's not always fun for them. It was fun for me because I like history. I think this is a good introduction to if your kid likes fantasy, but you want to get them into other genres. I think this series is really good for them, as well as the next series that I'm going to talk about, which is The Legacy of Orisha. So the children of blood and bone, the children of virtue and vengeance, and the children of anguish and anarchy. Again, fantasy, but historical fiction also as well. So this series tells the story of Zelly. She remembers when the soil of Orisha hummed with magic, burners ignited flames, tiders beckoned waves, and Zelly's reaper mother summoned forth souls. But everything changed the night magic disappeared. Under the orders of a ruthless king, Mage were killed, leaving Zelly without a mother and her people without hope. Phenomenal. Children of Blood and Bone was my absolute favorite. And it's one of those YA that, like, you kind of forget that it's YA. Like, you kind of forget. So again, I think it's one of those series that is genre bending, right? Because it is historical fiction, but it also is a fantasy because there is a lot of magic. Brings up the conversation of the Orisha, right? You can talk about gods, especially because from what I remember from high school, at least, I haven't spoken to a high schooler in a long time, but I remember we only really learned about Greek gods, right? I didn't learn about other mythology until I got to college. I think this is a good intro to that as well. So you see what I'm doing? Like, I'm giving y'all books that are good, but they're still open. Like, there's still doorways for other conversations that you could have with your kid. I think there's this misconception that, like, certain books like fantasy aren't deep or can't be dissected, and they absolutely can. You can read something fun and you can still dissect it, which then leads me to Belle by Beverly Jenkins. Absolutely loved it. It was a great audiobook if you want to listen to the audiobook. But Belle Palmer is finally free, separated from her father on the harrowing escape. Belle is lost and alone until she finds shelter with the best, the first free family she's ever known. For the first time in her 16 years, Belle can speak her mind, except for her feelings for a certain dark-eyed young man, the Boo. Anyway, educated and handsome at 18, Daniel Best is engaged to the prettiest, if a little spoiled, girl around. So when the bedraggled girl his parents take under their wing suddenly turns into a vibrant, lovely young woman, his attraction to her is a complete and complicated surprise. I loved Belle. I love Beverly Jenkins, and I'm going to use any opportunity that I can to introduce you to Beverly Jenkins. I think the teens should be reading romance. I think they should. I think you should keep them away from the erotica, right? But they also aren't dumb, and they are in a stage in their life where they are navigating these kinds of things, and it's uncomfortable to have certain conversations with your parents. It might be easier to see where their head is if there is a book or some sort of content to bridge the gap in whatever the case may be. So Belle is awesome. Next up, What the River Knows. This is the Secret of the Nile series. I also enjoyed the audiobook for this. Again, to bring it back to that conversation of, like, I'm not the target audience, I often think that teenagers are written in books kind of special. By special, the babies be a little slow in the books. Like, they be writing them like they dumb. And I don't think that about teenagers. But again, I'm not the target audience. So we need to be writing things in a way that they will understand them and not necessarily in a way that I will understand or that is tangible for me. So my gripe with this story originally was like, why are they treating this baby like she's slow? She know what she doing and what she talking about. Why is she acting like that? Like, why? What are we doing? What's happening? But Inez Oliveira loses her parents. Her parents are treasure hunters, and they, quote unquote, passed away in Egypt, and she takes it upon herself to go on a mission to Egypt to figure out what happened to her parents. That's all I'm going to tell you. Part 2 to the book comes out November 5th, and that one is Where the Library Hides. I think the conversation in this one could kind of lead to like, what is treasure hunting and why is it good, why is it bad, right? Mostly, why is it bad? And a conversation about like, where are museums getting their art from, like, what will people do in the name of treasure, right? The story is good though, and there's a bit of a love interest in there that I enjoyed. I thought it was super cute. And then last but certainly not least, or no, we got 2 more. These 2 are kind of spooky. So first we have Delicious Monsters. Daisy sees dead people, something impossible to forget in bustling ghost-packed Toronto. She usually manages to deal with her unwanted ability, but she's completely unprepared to be dumped by her boyfriend. So when her mother inherits a secluded mansion in northern Ontario where she spent her childhood summers, Daisy jumps at the chance to escape. But the house is nothing like Daisy expects, and she begins to realize that her experience with the supernatural might be no match for her mother's secrets, nor what lurks within these walls. If you want to get into horror, or your teen wants to read horror, and you don't necessarily want them reading adult horror, I think this author, Leslie Sambury, is a good place to start. She has another one, well, she has a few books. So Tender Beast is another one by her that is a little spooky, and then she has a fantasy one, a series. The first one is Blood Like Magic, and then the other one is Blood Like Fate. So that author has a lot if your kid ends up liking, or if you end up liking their book. And then this next one I have not read, but it says The Black Girl Survives in this one. It's a collection of horror stories. So it is a YA anthology of horror stories centering Black girls who battle monsters, both human and supernatural, and who survive at the end. Be warned, dear reader, the Black girl survives in this one. Celebrating a new generation of best-selling and acclaimed Black writers, the Black girl survives in this one makes space for Black girls in horror. 15 chilling, thought-provoking stories place Black girls front and center as heroes and survivors who slay monsters, battle spirits, and face down death. Prepare to be terrified and left breathless by the pieces in this anthology. I think it sounds really good. I actually want to read this one. So maybe I'll make it like a side quest for the book club, and we can read it in October together. Maybe. I'll think about it. But that is the list. Let me know down below, have you read any of these? Are you interested in reading some of these with your teenager or the teens in your life? It could be your cousin, it could be your niece, it could be your nephew, your friends' kids, your neighbor, whoever. Let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Everything is linked down below. And without further ado, bye friends. I love you. You are kind. You are smart. You are important. See you next video.